right. Hey everybody, and welcome back. My name is Sue and I'm from OML Embroidery. I just got this going a little bit. I had to test a couple of things. Everything looks fine. We will just give it a minute for everyone to get their notification and show up. Awesome. So Dawn says all good. Thank you. Hello, Alicia and Misha. And let's see, Marjorie, hello. Chris Yost, hello. Who did I miss? Marcia, hello. From North Carolina. Oh, Lorelai's back. I saw that. Oh no, I have Sue echoing. What can I do? Dawn, can you help her out with that? Susan Weehee, hello. Susan, me, she says. Is your hand up too? So I'd like everyone to notice my add-on to me here. Sue Brown, LOL, EMB. Those are my, those are what Don's, those are my credentials, and I'm the connections police. Can you help Lorelai, please? What? So, okay, I just thought I was being funny, so that's my credentials, LOL, EMB, connections police. So, yeah, why not? Why not? Hit the thumbs up. Yeah, thanks everyone. Hit the thumbs up and subscribe to the channel and share all you can so we can keep this going because I'm having so much fun. Okay, it is 1 minute left and then we're going to dig right into this. So I'm going to start off fast and then I'm going to explain everything. And remember, it's going to be a bit shorter than what we were doing before because this is stuff that I really, really want you guys to sort out and learn and understand. So today is all about the checkerboards. So you could make a real mess of this if you didn't do connections. So the first thing when I look at this, I see, okay, I don't have to worry about the yellow ones. Why? Because they're pretty much touching. So you could start wherever you want, move the start and stop points, and you do that by getting into node mode or edit outlines. And you can start here, end here, start here, end here, blah, blah, blah. So those are all connected. Now, how would you do the other ones? Well, there's more than one way of doing it. And as long as they're connected and hidden, there's no wrong way of doing it. So the wrong way of doing it would be to make a running stitch that goes straight across over the yellow. That's not cool. You can do it under the yellow. That's cool. That's cool enough. But however your mind sees it. Oh, Jill. Hello, Jill. However your mind sees it to plot it out, you can always grab a piece of paper or an iPad and draw it out and come up with something. But the easy way is, look, I've got my connections here. You can barely see them. And the satin stitch plays the cover up for it. So there's my section here, and you can see this is going to stitch. That's connected, so that's going to stitch with just moving the start and stop points. This is going to stitch, and then I have my connection stitch running alongside, which is fine, to connect to this one, and then another travel stitch and connect to that one. Now we've efficiently put it together so all the yellows stitch out and then all the blacks stitch out. Fantastic. So you could, if this was a flag or something like that, that's how you do it. What if you didn't have the outside? Now, I know this looks kind of terrible. I don't need this here. It's hard to grab. I know this kind of looks terrible, but I'm just going to show you guys how I would do it. And again, there's no wrong way. You don't have to do it the way I do it. But this is just a suggestion. So I would stitch this one first, very first. We're going to stitch the yellow last. And Cindy King, hello. Cindy King's talk slow. I'm racing back. Well, stay safe, Cindy. Stay safe. You can always watch it on rewind, remember. So I would start with this square. Stitch the square, and then I'm going to do a running stitch over to this one. And this will be under everything. And then I would do a running stitch to this one and stitch it out. And then a running stitch to, following this line up here, and then the center one stitches last, and then cover it all up with your yellow. And then you don't have anything showing. Or if you wanted to do them in a different order, that is fine too, as long as these connectors are underneath everything. If you're really careful, you can do it along the side, but it's not the greatest in this one because it might show because the black is so much darker than the yellow. You can always try. It's easy enough, but, you know, there you go. So more than one way, let's keep that in mind. It's not wrong as long as they connect. So let's do something a little more complicated than that. How about we throw in a couple more colors? So we have blue, yellow, turquoise, and green. And it might be a little daunting for you, like, where do I start? Well, start with the easiest first. The two blues that are touching. So that part's easy, stitching those ones out. Now we've got quite a space between the yellows, we've got quite a space between the greens, and we certainly have quite a space between the turquoises. So again, many ways that you can do this. And I am going to start with the turquoise colors. So I'm going to do them in this order, 1, 2, and 3. Now, if you wanted to do this one as 1, 2, and 3, doesn't matter. This is how I just saw it to start, just top to bottom to side. So it doesn't matter which way you do it as long as they connect. So I'm not starting with the blue ones because I might need them to cover up some connections. So for 1, 2, and 3, you can go on the outside or you can go through the middle, kind of like the black and yellow one. So starting with this one, and then make a running stitch here to here, and then back through the blue one because we're going to cover it up to number 3. And that connects everything internally and very nice. So there's a lot of options. Now, because we have the satin along the outside, that's going to make it much easier because we can run it along the outside. And I'm going to show you how to do that. But first, let's talk about the green ones. So the order we're stitching in is the turquoise first, and we're going to have a couple lines crossing over. That's okay. The green, we can kind of do the same thing. We'll start at 1 over here. This will be the first green. Do a connection to this green, and we're done with the greens. What are we going to do with the yellows? Easy enough. Let's go from yellow to yellow, yellow to yellow with a little running stitch, and then the blue is going to cover everything up. So if you have 2 or more with 1 in the center, should you always do this one last in order to cover or cross over the stitches? If it's going to work out that way, yes. That just happens to be the way that this one went for me. But if you can come up with a better, order for it, then go for it. Again, I'm going to say this very strongly today. There's no wrong way of doing it. If your stitches don't show and everything is connected reasonably, efficiently, then you are correct. That's how I'm going to say it. So if you decide to start with blues, then you work around that in a whole different way. So try to remember that when we're working on different things, because you do not have to do it exactly how I do it. If you look at it, and it does take a little bit of practice to learn, to plot this out. When I look at it, I already know what I'm doing. If you don't, then you can do a little practice, something like this. And you can make yourself a little, plan, I guess, plan of action for it. And you could do this on your embroidery software, and you can just draw it out however you want. I like these arrows. These are part of the symbol, so it's just super handy for me. And I'm going to keep everything going around. And you could also, if you've got Jill Scarsberg, thank you very much. Cindy King saying hi to everyone. Ooh, my reminder didn't go off, but I'm here now. Ooh, come on, YouTube. We need the reminders. So is everyone with me so far? More than one way. If you have satin stitches, that is your best bet to hide your connections. Plot it out either in your head or on paper. I mean, seriously, you could grab a piece of paper or a pen or something like that and sketch this out and plan the colors. Your sketch doesn't have to be, you don't have to print it and do it that way, but I mean, you can draw squares, or if it's a bee, you can draw, like a buzz bee, and just kind of figure out the colors on it. So plotting, this is what this whole section is. Plan it out in your brain, and then you can figure it out. Now, if you're starting from nothing, starting from this square, and you don't have all the rest of them, then you definitely need to plot it out so you could do everything at the same time. So how do we do this? This is a design that I created, and I'm just playing around with it. I don't know if you guys do that, but I will put some shapes on the table, I call it, and make something out of it, and then go and connect them. If I'm digitizing from clip art, then I will do the connections as I go, as I work from color to color. So for this example, we are taking a design that I finally finished, we'll say, finally finished, and I want to connect everything, because your design isn't finished until you connect it. So here are the steps. Let's keep in mind too, you can only connect designs that you have created yourself in your software. So if this is a stitch file, you can't move the start and stop points, so you won't be able to make connections. So the start and stop points in a stitch file will stay where they are. Stitch file is made for stitching, and a working file is made for working. So this has to be a native file where you have all of the editing abilities. So one of the ways to be able to tell that is you go into node mode, and there's angles and start and stop points. So that's how you know it's a good point. So save yourself some darn heartache, and don't try to do this on a stitch file. Stitch a stitch file. So let's go here, and we're going to talk about the steps for doing this. So I've kind of done the plotting for this one. Now the first thing that's really important, this red arrow means it's really important, that the blocks have to be together and in the right order. Let me say that again. They have to be together and in the right order. And by that, I mean this has to be the first block, this has to be the second block, this has to be the third block, and they have to be grouped together like this right here. Can you see that? That is all of them in the correct order, and you must do that or you will not be able to do the connections. So that is number one on your list. Make sure everything is in the order according to your plotting plans. So once you have that, so all my turquoise are in order. Now I want to connect 1 to 2. So I am going to just draw, this is exaggerated obviously so you can see what I'm doing. I could hide it dramatically, but I want you guys to see what I'm doing. This is the connector to 1 and 2, and this is what we want. And hide it and, all that good stuff. The only thing that is wrong on a lot of them is that this running stitch has to be between this block and this block. A lot of times when you're digitizing something, it goes right to the bottom, absolutely to the bottom, and then you go, oh, my connections aren't working, and that's because it's going to stitch out the whole thing and then slam your connection in. So you have to pay close attention to this. So I've marked them over here on the bottom right hand side. Make sure each block is in the correct order. Susan Weehee, thank you very much. I'm almost in danger of knowing what you're doing. Good. Good, good. Good, good, good. That's awesome. So everything, look at this. So we've got the square, we've got the run, we've got square number 2, and we've got another run. You can't see it, but look, it's there. I hid that one very nicely. Can you do this all one design so your travel stitches are designed into this at the same time? Does this make sense? Yes. If you are digitizing and you know what you're doing, you've planned it out, then create a block and run your stitch over, create another block, run your stitch over, create another block, and then keep going in that regard. But what I'm trying to show here is that it doesn't always work that way. That a lot of times, and what I've been teaching you guys is that, we can put a few shapes down and change it and then make it into something else. For something like that, you wouldn't take the time to do the connections as you were coming up with something new because it's all going to change. So that is a good scenario that you would do them at the end. So, for example, this is doing something at the end. Okay, I know it's only squares, but just say if it's something more difficult that we worked on. Marjorie, thank you very much. Much appreciated. Something more complicated that we did in the earlier class, and that, it's more complicated, a little harder to do, that you'd have to plan it out a bit more. Does some depend on the location of your design on a garment that maybe you would start in the center? I suppose if you're doing hats, that would count, but no, not necessarily. Like if you're doing a shirt logo, say all these colored squares are a logo, I would still do it the same way. And I would, like I said, you could do underneath the greens and up to the turquoise. You could run the yellow through the blue and the blues attached. I mean, that's easy enough. I'm just kind of showing one scenario. Push-pull issue. Well, you shouldn't, because in this example, we have satin stitches. So you could add a little bit of push-pull on the satin stitches to make sure everything covers up. But unless you're way off, they should tuck under the satin stitches. Now, if you are doing it underneath, doing the underneath one that I showed you back here, this one, you don't have to worry about pull compensation or anything because it's underneath. So there you go. Oh yes, I missed that part. That's okay. So either way, whatever you're happiest with, and remember the rule is, If it's all connected and your connections don't show, then it's good. There's no one way of doing this. So, importantly, make sure everything is in the correct order that you need it to be. So, for example, on Sunday we were stitching out the kitty cat with the birds, and there was an extra color change for the top bird's beak. You can't move that anywhere because then it is going to stitch in like behind the bird. So you can't just do, for something complicated like that, you can't just do one color change and, color sort rather, and everything's going to be right. It has to be in the right order, and the software does not always, put it in the right order that you want. It just kind of automatically does it, which is not necessarily the greatest thing, but it helps. It can help, but not necessarily. So it might color sort, if I was to color sort this, I got a ton of everything, then it might put this one first, this one second, and this one third, which would completely invalidate our connections. So if you're, say, creating instead of digitizing on top of clip art, which most people do, but if you do like we've been doing with shapes and making it yourself, then you wait for the connections until the final part. I mean, you don't have to, but there's no point making a connection. I get irritated with that. If you make a connection and then you have to change something and then you have to do the connection too. So I try to doodle it out with pen and paper and kind of come up with a plan, even if I'm creating from shapes. But not always. For a lot of the classes, I just come up with something in my head. Oh, I want to do a torch for our garden. And then I just make a torch for our garden and then do all the connections. So here is basically how we are connecting it. So I'm just going to click on here and find out where I am. This one? Yes. So we are starting on this one with, nope, that's the other one. Okay. Because I have so many copies of the same thing. So this is telling me what order we're doing. So it's all the turquoise, and I'm just going to make that smaller. Then all the yellow. See, it's highlighting the yellow. And then, see, this is wrong. It's one blue, two greens, and then a blue. That is an unnecessary color change. So you could either move this one up so the two blues are together. They don't need to be, made a connection. You just have to move the start and stop points. But they do need to be together because then it'll stitch this one, trim, stitch the green ones, trim, and come back and stitch the blue one and trim. And I think that's the end of this one. Yes, it is. So we don't really want that. So let's move this guy up. And for most of the software, you can just left click and drag it up. Hatch, you can use some arrows. E4, you can use some arrows. Let's see, PEDesign, I think you have a nice step screen on the left. And Embird, you have it on the right where you can just move it like I did. I just left clicked and dragged. So there is a way of doing it. So another thing though, a little shortcut that I found that I really liked on this one is you select one of the squares. So say I'm starting at number 1 and I want to make these connections, that you can right click, and if you go here to digitize path before or after, which is really sweet. I wanted to look at Hatch and see if it had anything like that. Wilcom E4 has an insert, so you can insert it and it puts it after it. But why is this so cool? Because it is going to place it directly after the first turquoise square, and then it's the stitch, so you don't have to move stuff around. Believe me, it's frustrating and it takes a long time. So if you can do an insert, or if you have this software where you can insert after, then that makes it so much easier. So this is the rhythm of it. Square, running stitch, and it highlights everything. Maybe I'll zoom in for you guys. It highlights everything. So square, and then we're going to run over to number 2, and then we are going to stitch number 2, and then we're going to run over to number 3, and this is the run. Again, remember, it's exaggerated so you can see my pathways on it, and everything is in the right order, so it works. Sabine, thank you very much. Thank you. And then we're going to go on to the yellow, and same rhythm. It's going to, after the last turquoise, it's going to trim, because of course we're making a color change. So now I chose this one, the top one. You could start on either. Remember, nothing's wrong. Once it stitches out, it's going to run over to number 2 yellow, and then it's going to stitch yellow, and then we're going to trim, and we're going to keep on going like that. So these ones, the blue ones, there's no running stitches in between because they are touching. So they will do it as long as you can put the start wherever you want, but you want the stop to be right there, and then go to the next square. Oh, I gotta apply. I always forget where I am. And this start point has to go, where the stop was. And it doesn't matter where the stop one is. Start and stop on runs need to go the correct direction. I had a couple of backwards and ended up with an unnecessary trim. Yep, that happens. That happens a lot. So, good point. Thank you very much. You can't connect this yellow to that yellow here with starting here. It's backwards. So you can still change the start and stop points, but you can only put it on the ends. And that's how it works. And we can move it. See, I moved it here. We do want it here. But if you are going through, and this is where the stitch simulator is very handy. I use it depending on what I'm doing. If it's really difficult, I do it until I see a mistake and I correct the mistake, and then I start the stitch simulator again because you don't remember them all. So that's exactly what I would do here. But let's neaten everything up first, and let's go here and look. So these are not perfectly, squished in there or on the line or anything like that, because the satin stitches are covering it over. And so you don't have to worry about it. But if you have something, let me show you like this. Let's add a point just so I can, if you kind of make a mistake and do something like that, then let's see, when I put it back on square, that's going to show. That those stitches will show, especially if you're, stitching on white or something. So that would have to be a little tightened up sort of thing. And you just, make it flat. You don't want it over. You want it just under. So I'm going to zoom in and show you guys what that looks like. Something like that. Tighten it up to where the yellow one is. Look. And that's good enough. If you have it too far over and you have some, push-pull compensation issues, you might get into trouble. So just just along the outside edge. And then you know that your satin stitches are going to cover it up. And it's perfect. Now, the green that I was playing with, I moved it in a little bit, and it's still okay because the satin stitches are covering it. You could always make your satin stitches a little bit wider, but you know, it's best to keep it how you want, which is great. So this is how, on this one, this is how you add your jump stitches, wow, really? I need more coffee. You add your connection stitches after you create something. And what I'm going to do later on in the series, I'm going to bring up some of the more complicated ones that we worked on for the classes, you know, the fish-ish and stuff like that. And because I, you know, show you guys all the levels of what I'm doing, you'll be able to see like that I figure out the connections after, like at the end. So that's what we're going to do, deconstruct it and put it together. We will be doing the digitize, the connections as you go, and plot out a design. We're going to be doing all this, but I just want to get you guys into the groove of what you're doing. So one last review. You can only do this on a native embroidery file. You can't do it on a stitch file, so PES, JEF, you can't do that. It won't work. I can take a class and show you guys that as well, why it won't work and it won't connect. So second of all, make sure your blocks are in the right order and together. So if you want this one to start, it needs to be the first one. If this one's the first one, then it's your connection that you made isn't going to work. So you do have to pay attention over here to your list. So that's really important. And yes, as Alicia said, make sure that your running stitches are in fact going in the correct order. It has to start here and end here. You could end it here if you want. You could, as long as they're connected, and you'll have to move the start and stop points. So it needs to, the block needs to stop here so that the running stitches can start here and end here, and then the next block has to start. So they're all connected, and it's awesome. Karina, hello Karina. So, and make your connections either on the outside, and they'll be covered up. This works for applique as well, by the way. Applique stitches are very forgiving, and we are going to do that on a simple design. Show you how to do the stitches in the background first and do all the connections underneath the applique, and tuck them in and cover them. If you can't cover them with a satin stitch or another object, then you can go back to the one that I showed you and do it underneath, which is also fine in any order that you want. This one I showed you that the center stitch, we're using it as a highway, and it's going to stitch out last and cover everything up. So I hope you guys are still with me, and you can put a whole bunch of squares on your whatever software you're using. Again, you can use any software. Try to find that shortcut for placing your running stitches after. And then or it's insert, or this one I thought was digitize path after. It tells you what it is. Make sure everything's in the right order and connect away and stitch it, or at least do the stitch simulator so you can see if there's any mistakes. So hopefully easing you guys into this. We're going to keep working on it for a little while. You guys will be way ahead of everyone else, even to this part, because whenever I do, a cleverly collected design, everybody says, oh, it stitches out beautifully. And if you want to know why it stitches out beautifully, that's why. Connections. End of story. It's awesome. Cindy King, I like this place. Good. Good, good, good. It's a lot to take in. It's also the most important stuff to take in. So we're going to keep going, keep practicing, watch designs stitching out and see their connections. And you will be like, oh, yes, that's a really good connection. I'm trying to point them out, really good connections, when we're doing our stitch out, so you guys can kind of still get in the mood for it and just kind of go through it, plot it in your head. It just takes a while to think connections, but you guys got it and you guys can do it. Lorelei, I look at designs in a whole new way. True. Do you see shapes everywhere? And now you're going to see shapes that are connected by running stitches. And it's awesome. You just have to train your brain. So, thanks everyone for watching. I hope you guys like this video. I hope you guys will do your homework with some squares and make some connections and make them the two ways. So, going around the outside or internally. And make sure there's no trims in between the same colors. And it's awesome. So I'll see you guys next week for more connections. Bye, everyone.